Before the dawn of man, different tribes of hominins lived across a large barren land with few water sources. As the water shortage grew worrisome, the stronger tribe of the hominins kicked the weaker ones away from their water source, chasing them out into the desert. The tribe that had been chased away found a new place to settle, but without the luxury of water. Then suddenly, an alien monolith appears out of nowhere, and they gather around it, reluctantly touching it. Soon after, the ostracized tribe finds bones from a dead animal and learns how to use them as weapons. Once they had mastered wielding a weapon, the tribe goes on its first hunt, using its newfound weapons to incapacitate its prey. The tribe continues to get stronger and eventually returns to their previous water source to regain their stolen home with their weapons made out of bones. Hundreds of thousands of years later, humanity has evolved from using simple tools to space travel, and Dr. Haywood, the chairman of the US Council of Astronauts, is sleeping in his seat on a spaceship during a journey to a station up in space. Once the ship connects to the station, Haywood gets out and is greeted warmly by one of the station's front desk attendants. He tells her that a man called Miller was supposed to meet him, but he didn't arrive yet. While she was offering to call the man, Miller hurries into the room and greets the captain warmly. After they exchange pleasantries, they head toward an automated machine that asks them to say their names and destination for further clarification. After the confirmation, they head down to the common lounge to have some breakfast before Haywood's flight leaves for the moon. Before going to the restaurant, Haywood tells Miller to go on ahead because he had a call to make. In a small booth, he puts in his ID and dials the number on what looked like a satellite computer, and when the call goes through, an image of his very popular daughter comes through, who asks him if he would come to her birthday party the next day. Haywood regretfully tells her that he would have to miss it because he was traveling, and after telling his daughter to tell her mom that he called, Haywood hangs up the phone. After leaving the booth, he meets a Russian friend and colleague, Elena, along with her companions who were Russian scientists. When they offer him a drink, he informs them that he was meeting someone for breakfast and that he won't be able to stay long. Elena tells him that she and her team are going back home after spending a month calibrating a new antenna. When they ask where he was headed, Haywood tells them that he was going to Clavius's base. Curious, one of the scientists asks the captain if he could clarify what's been going on up there, saying that odd things have been happening and that the phone lines have been down for the past 2 weeks. The earlier scientists continue to insinuate that they've gotten reports of a very serious epidemic erupting on the base and asks Haywood if that was indeed the case. Haywood explains to the researcher that he was not at liberty to discuss that before bidding them farewell. After his meal, Haywood boards the next ship and starts the journey to Clavius's base, and when the ship arrives at the moon, it slowly descends and lands on a large pad on the base. The ship is then slowly lowered to its parking space and the passengers are let out. As soon as he arrives, Haywood is required to have a meeting with the main personnel on Clavius. After being introduced to the group, Haywood thanks them for having him there and addresses the issue that had been worrying all of them, which is the matter of complete security and isolation due to their special discovery. And the base had fabricated the story of the epidemic just for this purpose. Haywood assures them that he understands that this fabricated story could come as an embarrassment for their facility, but keeping their discovery a secret held more importance. He leaves the panel open for any questions or concerns the group may have, and Bill, one of the personnel, asks Haywood how long this cover story was going to last, to which he answers that he didn't quite know. After the meeting was over, Haywood and 2 of his colleagues head out on a space bus to investigate the artifact that was found. During the journey, Haywood congratulates them on a job well done and on the way in which they handled the entire situation. Jack shows some papers where graphs were drawn, indicating the magnetic field the artifact that they found was emitting. They explained that even a large meteorite couldn't emit such strong fields, so they excavated the area to discover more about what was going on, and all signs pointed at the artifact being deliberately buried instead of being covered up by a natural erosion. The only thing that they were sure about regarding the object was that it was buried 4 million years ago. Once they arrive at the site, Haywood and the rest of his entourage find the monolith exposed and ready to be studied. As he and his team start examining and taking pictures of the objects, it starts raising a high-frequency signal that makes the group feel excruciating pain. 18 months later, the American spacecraft known as Discovery 1 leaves Earth carrying 5 scientists, and the latest computer started its journey to Jupiter on a mission. This marked the first manned attempt to reach a distant planet, and the ship had a strange orientation as it makes the crew seem like they're walking on the walls. 3 of the men on the ship were put in a state of hibernation, while 2 of them manned the spacecraft. Mission Commander David and Dr. Frank were eating their meals and watching the broadcast about their mission that had begun 2 weeks ago. Later, as Frank was lounging at his quarters, the ship ship's AI, Hal, informs him that he's received a transmission from his parents. His parents had sent a message wishing him a happy birthday and updated him on all the current affairs that they've been handling. In the control room, David was passing the time by sketching his friends in hibernation, and Hal, interrupting, asks to see the sketches and appreciates David for getting better. As they talk, Hal asks the captain if he'd been having second thoughts about the mission. When David seems confused, Hal continues to say that he might be projecting his own concerns because he had noticed some odd things about the mission, such as the rumors that there was something that was dug up from the moon. Although Hal didn't give these rumors much thought, the AI found it strange that the preparations for this mission were kept under tight wraps. Then suddenly, Hal reports that he had picked up a fault in one of the antenna devices and explains that it was going to fail completely in the next 72 hours. After discussing it with his partner, David retrieves the device and does a complete check but couldn't find anything wrong with it. The astronauts then conclude that Hal must have made a mistake for the very first time. When the AI hears that he'd made a mistake, the machine was unable to accept it and attributes the situation to human error. Hal assures the two men that his series of computers have never made a mistake and that they shouldn't worry. Wanting to speak privately, David takes Frank into one of the pods and discusses the incident. Frank tells his partner that he had a bad feeling about Hal and suggests that they should cut out his higher brain functions without affecting Hal's purely automation tools. While they're discussing strategies on how to proceed, Hal uses his camera to read their lips as they've cut all audio communication in the pod. Later, Frank leaves the ship inside the pod to replace the damaged antenna, and after ejecting the pod to reach the antenna, Hal disconnects the pod from the ship, leaving Frank without a safety net and letting him float out into space. Shocked, David hurries out inside one of the other pods to save his friend, and after following Frank deep into space, he finally reaches his stranded friend and catches him with the pod's arms. Back inside the mothership, Hal causes a computer malfunction and causes the hibernating astronauts' life support to fail, killing all three of them. When David returns after retrieving Frank's body, he orders Hal to open the main door, but doesn't get any responses. After repeatedly asking for a response, Hal confirms that he is listening. David asks the computer to open the door, but Hal refuses, telling him that his actions to disconnect him might have put the mission in jeopardy, and he couldn't allow him to do that. Although David tries to deny the accusations, Hal is adamant that he knows what they have planned, and explains that he could not let him in to follow through. Giving up on the computer, David decides to jump out of the pod and open the door by using the emergency opening system. David knows that this is going to be one of the most dangerous missions ever, but he knows he has to do something. And not having a choice but to let his friend's body go afloat, David calibrates the pod to get as close to the door as possible and uses the pod's hand to open it. Once he has the door open, he turns the pod around so the opening can face the door and jumps through. The force of the ejection slams him around the pod for a bit until he manages to close the door, successfully re-entering the ship. Hal seems upset and asks him just what he thinks he was doing, and ignoring the computer, David climbs up the shaft and into Hal's control system. While David was making his move, Hal tries to dissuade the captain from the task by telling him that he's feeling much better now and that he wouldn't have any problems with him anymore. Hal continues to speak as if he was human, trying to bargain with the angry captain. Despite the continuous begging, David continues to ignore the machine and climbs into the chamber that held the brain of the computer and goes on to disconnect it. And as soon as Hal is shut down, a pre-recorded message from Haywood is projected on the wall and explains that due to security reasons, only the Hal computer is given access to this knowledge. They were supposed to receive this message once they were on the surface of Jupiter and all the crew was revived. Haywood continues to explain that 18 months ago, the first signs of intelligent life were discovered and the artifact was buried 40 feet below the moon's surface, and besides a very high frequency aimed at Jupiter, the 4-million-year-old monolith had remained completely stagnant, and the crew had been sent there to investigate why that was. And when David finally makes it to Jupiter, he sees a much larger monolith moving around the planet's orbit. Using one of the pods, the captain ejects the mothership so he is able to examine the object closely, and suddenly his pod is sucked into a colorful vortex at incredibly high speeds, and he has no control of its movements. The pod shakes as the speed increases, and David is forced to shut his eyes, unable to keep his body stable. The colors inside the vortex continue to change into beautiful colors the deeper he went, and after what seems like hours of traveling, David is transported inside an explosion of bright white light, which opens up to other colors and a strange blue landscape. Then suddenly, his pod finds itself in what looked like an 18th century bedroom painted in all white. David climbs out of his pod with his suit and mask still on and starts looking around. Inside the mirror, located in the bedroom, he sees the image of a man having a meal while sitting at his desk. When the man turns around, it's revealed that it was the elderly version of David. He then gets up from his desk and walks back into the room as if the young David had been transformed into the old man. He walks back to his desk and picks up the wine that he had left, and when he turns to the bed, he sees an even older version of himself laying down in it. In front of the bed, another small monolith appears, and David reaches out to touch it, which transforms him into a fetus enclosed in a protective substance and is shown as he orbits around the Earth. And that is how the movie comes to an end.